Good morning, Pastor Ron Jetter, Immanuel Lutheran Church, Grandview, Washington, 300 South Euclid. Come see us, 10 a.m. Sunday morning. We're open for worship, word and sacrament. Come hear the word. Come join in the Lord's Supper, 10 a.m. Sunday morning, live at the church or on Zoom. My children were born in a desert. By the way, this is Monday, the 9th of November, 2020. My children were born in February and May, but it was in the desert. The Indian Wells, it may be a name you've heard of if you've camped or traveled through Southern California, the Mojave Desert. There's a place called Indian Wells. However, about 200 miles north of Indian Wells in what's known as the High Desert, the North Mojave Desert, there's something called the Indian Wells Valley. Basically suggests that there were native tribes that had migrated over a large area of the desert between California and Nevada, and were able to then encamp or settle at places where they could find water. There were water even in the desert. There were wells. There were a few lakes. We lived at a place called China Lake. The lake had dried up some 30,000 years ago, but it was a great place for the United States Navy to then do whatever they wanted. In the years following the Second World War, there was really one mission that Truman and then Eisenhower had to deal with: keeping nuclear war from ever starting. And in order to then ensure that we had superiority in the air, the Navy developed a new air weapons research base. It was known as NAWS or NOC, the Naval Air Weapons Center, or the Naval Air Weapons Station. And out in the middle of the desert where there were no prying eyes, the U.S. Navy had no ships. They had fleets of airplanes, A-4s, A-7s, F-18 Hornets. They would take off over our house every morning, 5 days a week. 6 a.m., the Hornets, 6 of them flying over the test wing for the Navy, where they had the air-deployed weapons. I remember when the first Gulf War happened, the headline, I may have said this before too, the headline, President Bush, and that was Bush 41, George Herbert Walker Bush, launched Desert Storm to stop Saddam Hussein, who was invading Kuwait. We had the headline, and then the rest of the article was about how those weapons performed. I'm sure I've talked about this before. Those weapons were developed by people in the congregation that I served there. The civilian town was called Ridgecrest. We had wells. Those wells were sunk deep into the earth, and those wells would pull up pure water, without which there was no way we could survive in the desert. We were 100 miles from fresh water. Well, there was a river up north, and there were streams that would come out of the Sierra Nevada, but most of them would then go underground, and it helped to create that aquifer. That aquifer, though, had stored up water for thousands and thousands of years, allowing the town of Ridgecrest and the Navy base China Lake to survive to this day, to carry out its very important mission of making sure that we maintain air superiority. The Cold War is in different phases. There's still an important role for research bases like the Naval Air Weapons Station Center at China Lake, California. Deserts, though, are harsh environments to live in. It was 127 degrees the day we interviewed for a church up here in the Yakima Valley. That was August 1993. By October, we said, oh yes, and we were here. Still are. Glad to be here. In winter, it would get down to 0. One year, in fact, it got down so cold that pipes were bursting, because in Ridgecrest, it got down below freezing so rarely that they regularly would run water pipes through an uninsulated attic. And the year that it got down to 0, the entire town experienced massive amounts of water leakage and damage and ceilings coming down. Wow. Up here we prepare for the heat and for the cold. How did Israel prepare for the wilderness, for the desert? Not surprising then, here we are in the 15th chapter of the book of Exodus, starting with verse 22. Then Moses ordered Israel to set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. They came to Marah. They could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. That is why it was called Marah. And the people complained against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" He cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There the Lord made for them a statute and an ordinance. There he put them to the test. He said, "If you will listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God, do what is right in his sight, give heed to his commandments to keep all his statutes, I will not bring upon you any of the diseases that I brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they camped there by the water. 3 days. So that basically tells us how much water they had with them. 3 days of water. Human beings can't live much longer. Children, maybe an adult in the shade in a cool area could live 4 days without any water. But children, they have to have water every day. Their bodies are going along. Their metabolism is high. It processes stuff. It goes in, it goes out. They have to have water every day, 2 days really probably. Little babies, mothers trying to nurse babies, have to have water or it puts the people at serious health risk. And so when they come to a bitter spring, they become bitter. And what do? They immediately grumble. And God answers. God didn't lead them to fresh water. God led them to bitter water. And it allowed God then to act. This is the pattern that we're going to see throughout the rest of the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. God shaping the people. The people are not to take God for granted. This is a desert. To head into the desert and say, yeah, God will provide, it should be fine, is kind of a fool's errand. But it's a journey of faith, too, to say God will provide. Do that with humility, not with arrogance. God will provide. How will God provide? Well, and God then tells them, I'm going to put a statute in front of you. And here's the statute, that you keep my statutes. Do what is right. So the law is that you keep the laws. What laws? What laws do we keep? We do what is right in God's sight. How do we know what's right in God's sight? God hasn't given us the laws. All God gave us is a law that says, follow the law. So the first law is get ready to be law obeyers, law followers, lovers of the law. Get ready to impose upon your society a structure. Internalize that structure. Fall in love with that structure, with the way it orders your society. God has a desire that you live in a certain way. Live in accordance with that. And you will find yourself blessed. If you constantly push against that and constantly test the will of the Lord, the rightness of the law of God, you will find that your life invites all sorts of undesirable things into it. God gives us the ability to be happy in our hands. And so we're working up. It's going to take another 5 chapters, but we're working up to this set of boundaries that God will put around society. Do we love law? There's been a lot of conversation about law in our land. Is it fairly administered? What about police? Oh my goodness, if we all loved the law, we wouldn't need police. Well, I wish it were that simple. I wish it were that easy. We definitely need police in our society because the law isn't loved by everybody. Not everybody believes the law works for them. We've got work to do. But the law itself, the essence of law, the fact that there is law, is clear back to the time of Exodus, a gift that God gives to societies so that people may live in peace and prosperity with one another. Tomorrow I'll be at the church. Wednesday, again, there's no Bible study. I will have cataract surgery that day. See you tomorrow.